Welcome back to Killer Fun, where we explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week. I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And we're so glad that you're back with us today. Today, we are talking about a kind of murder, a wannabe film noir, wannabe thriller. I agree with a reviewer that I'll talk about a little bit later. The trailer makes a lot of promises and fulfills none of them.
I would say that's an absolute truth.
Yes. Because we watched the trailer and
we
thought,
did.
Oh, that looks kind of interesting.
It was riveting.
Yeah, it was like, ooh. And then it was, I can't believe a movie with a trailer that good was that boring.
What did you say? It's a kind of boring.
Yes. And I felt bad because I sent you that and you hadn't watched the movie yet.
I
and
hadn't.
I'm like trying to like, oh, well, you know, it's got a really great house and
Okay. Okay, let's just hit pause right now. You're not wrong. When you said that, you like the architecture and all that. And so like it was beautiful.
Oh
It was
my gosh.
the thing that kept me absolutely engaged.
Uh-huh.
Until I went down a rabbit hole of Frank Lloyd Wright's books and then other people's summaries of him and all of his ideas. And y'all, I don't think I came back. I came back in the movie and went, what's going on? I had to like reacclimate myself to the plot because I had gone on a complete rabbit trail, but that house
You didn't miss much. The rabbit trail had to be far more interesting than this movie.
Okay, I'm not a big fan of film noir anyway.
Yeah.
And so that's that. But as far as a film noir goes, you couldn't have had a prettier set, so I appreciate that.
Right.
But it was even boring for a film noir.
Well, and I think I want to like film noir because it seems very sophisticated and interesting. And I loved Gattaca, and that was like a reimagine of film noir.
And I liked the reimagined part of it.
Okay.
Right? Like, you're right. Okay. I'm about to tell him myself. I like movies. I am not a great film
Okay.
viewer.
Okay.
Which I have to say lightly because I really do like some sophisticated art pieces that are done through film. There are some things that I think are so good and they're so artsy and they're beautiful. But some of these, like these film noirs, they take themselves so seriously. And I just want to scream, you know you're a movie, right? I don't know. Like,
you're not in a modern art museum.
Like, yes, there's something about it that I'm like, get over yourself. You know?
I can appreciate that.
But that's, I think, on me. That's a me problem.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
I'm so glad we will.
So, yeah, all the reviews tend to agree with you, but we'll get there. Who's in it? Patrick Wilson plays Walter Stackhouse, the main character. He was in the TV series Fargo. He was William Travis in 2004's The Alamo, which I was like, well, that's kind of cool.
Hey, for those of you who are not from San Antonio, like we are from San Antonio, this is a big deal.
Yeah, it was a big deal when that came out.
Yeah.
And then, you know, it's relegated to every middle school history class.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's been in a bunch of thriller and horror movies, The Conjuring and Insidious. So he's done lots of stuff. Some of it's been good.
Yeah.
I would say, well, I can't decide if it was his performance or the script. Maybe a little of both.
I think it was his
a
directing.
perfect storm of not great here.
Yeah, but I think it does lie on the director's feet.
Okay.
Because I don't think his performance was terrible. I think he nailed exactly what he was supposed to do. And that was the problem.
Did you see that face? Did you see that?
People are listening right now. The face is making a lot of statements that I'm trying to be very careful with my words about because I feel badly because my husband is in film.
Uh-huh.
My son is a budding filmmaker.
Uh-huh.
And I'm just trashing everything about this that I think that they would love.
Oh, well, I think you and I are more of the popular opinions about these sorts of things.
It's true. Like, I like summer blockbusters.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with watching aliens blow up the White House.
Thank you. Independence Day is like my favorite. I love, and now The Martian. The Martian is my new Independence Day. I can watch it anytime, anywhere.
I love that movie. All right, so Jessica Biel plays Clara Stackhouse. Most people first became familiar with her on Seventh Heaven.
Yes.
She's done lots of movie roles. She's Justin Timberlake's wife. She's in the TV series The Sinner. Lots of stuff.
And I thought she was great.
Yes, she nailed the
Yes.
mentally disturbed person.
Yes.
Yes. Eddie Marson plays Marty Kimmel. He's in Showtime's long-running Ray Donovan, and he's had lots and lots of small character parts.
Yeah, I didn't know him like at all.
No, me either, but I guess if you've watched Ray Donovan, he would be very familiar with you. Not with you, to you.
Yeah. I was going to say, that's an interesting show.
That's a step too far. And then Vincent Kartheiser is Detective Corby, and Mad Men was his breakout.
Yeah, and I thought he was great too.
Yeah, him opposite Elizabeth Moss. You thought he was great in this?
I thought he did a great job doing what he was supposed to be doing.
Oh.
He was just, I guess that's my problem with it, is they all nailed the film noir so much I was bored to tears. And that's why I say this, that's why I was nervous about saying that it's the movie, because I know me, I don't jive well with this film type.
Okay.
But maybe
I
he
don't
didn't
think it's
do well.
just you.
Okay.
I did not. I loved him in Mad Men. I thought he was a really great villain type person opposite Elizabeth Moss in Mad Men.
Yeah.
I thought he was really good and very believable, and this was hokey.
Oh, well, that's how it always feels in these kind of movies.
Yeah.
But it felt like he was exactly that kind of detective.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
It probably looks really good on his reel, though.
Oh, maybe. He's done lots of other good stuff. He could leave this off his reel and it'd be fine.
I'm laughing so hard I'm crying. Get it together, Jackie.
All right. So, shall I recap this?
Yes.
All right.
Okay, wait. I do have a question.
Oh, sure.
All right. I didn't know the girl who played Ellie either.
No, I didn't know her either.
From like anything.
No.
But I thought she did a pretty good job too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Haley Bennett.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
She looks familiar though. I guess that's why I'm asking, because I'm like, who is this person? I don't know who this person is, but I thought she did a good job too.
She wasn't in anything I recognized, so I didn't write her name down.
Yeah. I don't know. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Recap this.
Okay.
wait. Let me take a sip of coffee first.
I promise my recap won't be as long or as boring as the movie. So a man behaves very sketchily in a movie theater. He comes in alone. He makes a scene saying hello to someone, annoys a bunch of other patrons by being loud and standing up and in the way. And then he leaves while a car advertisement is still playing prior to the feature presentation. That man was Kimmel, and he becomes a widower after the newsworthy murder of his wife. Elsewhere, a man, Walter, meets his wife, Clara, to see her off at the bus station as she's going to see her mother, who might be a hypochondriac. Walter has good news about his hobby. He's had a short story published. So despite their initial warm greeting, when he gets to the bus station, Clara's really unenthused about the idea that he's had a story published. She doesn't care. She's annoyed by it, would prefer he concentrate on his real job, which is architecture. And you can see there's a lot of tension in this relationship. Later, there's a party, and we presume it must be the housewarming party for their gorgeous home.
Oh, I had to hit pause.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
I want it. Why not me?
Yeah. We'll talk about it in a little bit. Walter, being an architect, designed the home, and Clara's boss is there, and she has a very successful career as a real estate agent. Walter briefly speaks to a young female guest, and Clara becomes convinced that Walter's having an affair with her. Though from what we can see in the movie, they literally just met at this party. So despite this successful career that Clara has, she's deeply mentally ill. Walter seems to want her to recover, but she refuses to see an analyst, not with her words. She agrees she needs to talk to somebody and get some help, but she just refuses to go. So Walter throws himself into his crime writer hobby and becomes fascinated by the Kimmel murder. So the man in the movie theater. Yeah.
We understand that.
Yeah. Okay.
But not for the same reasons.
Yes. So the two men, Walter and Kimmel, end up linked by the eventual deaths of their wives and pursued by the same detective who is convinced by the idea the husband did it and nothing will convince him otherwise. This is my summation. In a movie that is at once confusing and boring with only the most unlikable characters, we are left at the end with almost as many questions as we started with, but with no drive to find the answers any longer.
Okay, but did you have opinions about this? Did you have opinions about this plot and where it's going and like who done it and all this stuff?
Yes, and I had a revelation.
Yeah, because I had a lot of opinions for also thinking the movie was very boring, which oddly enough may have made me less enthused and open to the movie.
Okay.
Because I had a lot of opinions about it.
Oh, okay.
Which actually also may be true in other film noirs. And so there may be a pattern emerging with me.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I actually had one that made me appreciate it a little more, but not want to watch it again. So
do tell.
We learn that Kimmel, as you know from the very first scene, murdered his wife.
Yeah.
There's no question. Detective Corby, as banana pants as he is absolutely right when it comes to Kimmel. He murdered his wife.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you know this. It's not a revelation. But Walter pulls out that article about her death out of the newspaper because he pulls out articles of gruesome deaths all the time because he's like us.
Yeah.
Except he writes short stories about it and doesn't make a podcast because those weren't a thing in 1960.
Exactly.
So I think Clara realized he was fascinated with that particular murder, and she is the copycat. She threw herself off that bridge because she knew Walter was fascinated with that particular murder, and that was how she wanted to send that message.
Interesting.
And it made me appreciate it a little bit more.
Oh, interesting.
But still.
So I came away thinking he totally did it. He murdered her.
Oh, you think he murdered her?
I do.
Oh, I don't think Walter murdered her.
And I also don't think she's mentally ill.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think this is can you really be mentally ill in your jealousy if you were right all along?
Yeah, but I really think that she pushed him towards, he didn't know Ellie before the party.
Right, but I doubt it was his first time. I don't know. Those are the cues that I picked up from it, was that it's gaslighting 100%. It's interesting because in movies especially, we tend to just not believe the women.
Right.
When right from the beginning, she was like, you interested in that girl? And it's like, is it really crazy if she was right? And if she nailed it? And if she nailed it, is it her first rodeo? Aww. Maybe not. And maybe the fact is she fights for it and she fights it until he gaslights her enough that you're crazy, that then her only way to salvage it is to say, I'll go see somebody. But then she knows she's not crazy.
Oh.
She knows she's right, that this is all going on in the background, which the movie shows us. She's right about it. So is she actually mentally ill, or is she literally gaslighted in a toxic relationship and behaving like you do?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but her mother died the same night that she died, but she did not believe her mother was actually ill.
Yeah, no.
So she wasn't completely accurate in her assumptions. So it kind of made me not believe her only because here's this other thing that happened. And she was wrong about that. And Walter seemed really he wanted her to see an analyst and get better. He wanted to have an intimate relationship with her. And these were things that she pushed away. So I don't know.
I mean, it's hard for me because
Yeah.
I think we're so quick to just decide that she's crazy.
We'll see.
I don't know. Like, I guess I'm a little slower on that. Like, mothers are like that. God willing, we're not going to be mothers like that. But mothers can be like that.
Yeah.
You know, and they call and they're not. Just because they feel like, oh, she's not dying this time doesn't mean that she's sick. But it's so easy for us to just say, but she was right. He was doing all this behind her back and then coming home and wanting to sleep with her. No, thank you.
I don't think he came home and wanted to sleep with her until before he started having the affair.
No, but she saw it happening.
Oh.
She saw it happening.
Eh.
And I don't think saying no constitutes a mental illness either. I think it's totally okay for a woman to say, hey, I don't like the way you behave tonight and I'm not feeling connected and I'm saying no. But he used that as a reason why she needed to go see a therapist because she was wildly jealous because he was flirtatious and it pissed her off. And instead of saying, you're right, I was overly flirtatious. I'm sorry that made you uncomfortable.
Did you think he was overly flirtatious?
I think it doesn't matter what we think. It matters what she feels like.
Okay.
In her view.
Okay.
Well, and we know that he was because when his friend interrupted him, he gave his friend some crap like, what are you doing? Because his friend went over there to break it up and knew what was happening and got in the middle.
Oh,
and then
I don't think he was there to break it up. I think he was there to like, hey, you're married. I'd like to date her, whether she wants to date me or not.
Maybe
he wasn't a great guy.
Maybe it was a selfish break it up.
Yeah.
But because he saw what was happening.
Right.
Hey, not you, you're married. Me. He saw that it was happening.
Okay.
Right? Like, it doesn't matter. It's not a matter of, like, being altruistic. It was just that he saw what was happening and was like, no, off limits. And the guy was like, give me a break, man. Come on. Let me. There's a very beep blocker term for that. And that's what. And so we see it right from the beginning. And she's watching that whole exchange. Mm-hmm. She sees it all.
Right.
I don't know. So that was my big thing. And that's a me thing, but that may be why I hate film noir.
Okay.
Because in film noir, it is always the woman. She is always the crazy person, and they are always oppressed. And maybe it's good to talk about it. I just don't have the margin for it.
Okay. Well, this was based on a book.
Yeah, this was based on a book.
Mm-hmm. So by Patricia Highsmith, the original title of the movie and the title of the book used to be the same. They changed it because it's a little weird. It's called The Blunderer.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, that's the name of the book. And they had called it The Blunderer during production, and then they changed the name of it to A Kind of Murder.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think.
Why?
Well, because blunderer is hard to say, I think.
Well, I know, but
well,
those are two very different pictures you get.
Yes, because it was written by Patricia Highsmith. Mm-hmm. In the description, you can tell they made some changes. So for 2 years, Walter Stackhouse has been a faithful and supportive husband to his wife, Clara. He commits several blunders that claim his career and his reputation, cost him his friends, and eventually threaten his life. I'm like, where was all that in the movie? Mm-hmm. Because we didn't see him lose his job. We didn't see him lose any friends. The only friend that he had stood by him and said, you should get an attorney, man. Which I was like, you're a jerk and you have good advice. Come on. With unerring psychological insight, Patricia Highsmith portrays characters who cross the precarious line separating fantasy from reality.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I think maybe the movie didn't do the book justice.
That sounds like it. That sounds like a wildly different plot.
It's similar, but it seems like they left all the interesting stuff out because they were trying to tell the story and they tried to tell us the plot, but they didn't give us the story.
Yeah.
That's what I want to say.
That was good.
They're trying to get in, here's the key things that happen that you need to know. And instead of saying, hey, you know what if we left some of these key things out and give you more stories so that you understand and relate to the characters a little better.
Yeah.
It might have made for a better movie.
Yeah, because we just don't, that's the problem. We don't understand the motivations of the characters like at all. Like you and I have wildly different opinions about what motivated them or who was right and who was wrong or... That's true.
There's no way for us to come to any common ground because the movie didn't give us enough about these people.
Right. Like that you can not at all make an argument.
Right. Exactly.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Which that helps. That helps a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Helps understand it. You know what? In the very end there, it goes back to him writing the story and saying the end, which by the end of the movie, I was like, oh, that was cheesy.
Yeah, well, yes.
But now I'm thinking, what if the whole thing was just in his... What if the whole thing was just his story and everything's fine?
Yeah. None of it was real.
None of it was real. And that's why they actually went back. But got lost in the, trying to take itself too seriously and give us plot points. And so by the end, it didn't actually make you go, oh.
They didn't give us any device that showed us that when he was writing, that's when these things were happening.
But he did it all the way through it. And now I'm wondering, see, the director.
Okay, I could agree with that.
Cheers to the director.
For screwing up?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Because you know what? It's the director's fault and it's the director's gain. And at the end of the day, it's always going to be the director.
That's right.
I'm putting a lot of pressure on the directors.
Well, Patricia Highsmith, this was not her first novel. She's written many novels in the 50s and 60s primarily. And she wrote short stories for comic books and really made a writing career for herself out of psychological crime thrillers in the 40s, 50s, 60s, when that was a little more unusual. Mm-hmm. She's written some really good novels. So Strangers on a Train is based on her.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Hello.
The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Obviously amazing.
I mean, those have both been made into really good movies that I think do better tribute to the source material.
Okay, I'm going to say this. Do you know the initial release was in Russia?
Of A Kind of Murder? Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah. I do...
Huh.
I do wonder now,
Was it made for non-American audiences, maybe?
Yeah, that's why I wonder about the director and all of that kind of stuff, because it does seem like a little off color for what the other option scripts were,
Yeah. That's interesting. Well, even the good reviews of this are kind of lackluster. Nick Schager wrote for Variety. He had the impression that Walter was having an affair with Ellie before the party, which I didn't think.
I felt like that was the case,
But you felt like it was the case. Okay,
yeah.
See, I didn't think so. But yeah, he says, it's occasionally difficult to comprehend exactly why Walter continually behaves in a manner so obviously designed to make him look shady. I think we would have understood that more if they'd called it the Blunderer.
Yeah, I know.
Because I didn't know that until after I watched the movie. And I was like, well, that makes a lot more sense.
Although I can kind of understand why they changed the name, only because the Blunderer can connote a bit of guilt, but also can connote somebody who just makes mistakes and then kind of gets blamed for more than maybe is necessary, right? Well, A Kind of Murder, remember the line where he says, is it the same thing if you just wish them dead or take action? And his friend's like, yeah. Yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
That may be our clue, the fact that it never really happened. Because he is processing the fact that he's actually killing his wife in his story.
Okay.
And he's wondering now, is that the same thing as actually doing it?
Yeah, and it's actually not.
And that
they put that in the trailer, and then that whole scene was very benign.
Oh, benign. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the affair itself, all of that was fantasy.
Oh.
And that's why it feels like it was beforehand, because it just played into his fantasy of it all.
Okay.
I don't know. See, I'm going wildly
off the book here. I wish they would have given us a little more to work with so that we could actually understand it.
I feel right?
I mean, we sit here and we talk about it, and maybe I need a little more exposition.
Or better directing.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Andy Goddard. I'm sorry. Andy Goddard did direct Set Fire to the Stars, and he also has directed a few episodes of Downton Abbey.
Okay.
He's a British director and screenwriter, and I just feel I feel bad, Andy. I'm sorry, but I did not like your movie.
Yeah, that's fine. Website called the DulwoodExperiment.com has a review that they wrote in 2017, and the author of this article, Dullwood 68. So it's their website, so they can call themselves whatever they want. They don't have their name on it. A Kind of Murder is a good-looking movie in search of a leading character for the audience to identify and sympathize with. Thanks to both the script and Wilson's performance, he's vanilla bland from start to finish, and the movie never really knows how to make his predicament more intriguing or exciting.
Agree.
Yeah, I mean, like, really, he hits it right on the head. He blames the scriptwriter. Sarah Boyd's first-time script forgets to instill proceedings with any tension.
That's true, but the director should fix that.
Yeah. An editor, somebody help this movie out.
That is what's sad, is even for film noir, it was bad, and it could have been better. And it's not a half bad idea.
No, I bet the book is amazing.
I mean, it probably is.
MartinReeves.net. Martin Reeves is, I guess, he wrote about writers in film, and he calls it scribblers on celluloid, which I thought was
interesting.
Cute.
Yeah.
And he has a whole review of it, but he talks specifically about the writerly element of it. He says it's wannabe film noir, almost instantly forgettable, a kind of murder. Don't get too excited about this trailer. It makes a lot of promises and fulfills none of them. Just what I said at the top. Yep. I totally agree.
Agree.
He said he wanted a little more seediness in Walter for a man who seems to have he says, internal disgust and possibly outright hatred for his wife.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, he wanted it a little more seedy, and he's like, he would have believed Marty Kimmel writing these stories a little more than Walter Stackhouse. That it made more sense the way the movie was presented if Kimmel had been the writer owning a bookstore than if it had been Walter. Which I'm like, oh, that's kind of a nice...
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yeah. We can only wonder if he didn't initially seek out Kimmel to get tips on how to do it.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
At first.
Yeah.
I really did.
If you're going to write a mystery, make darn sure it's mysterious. Like, okay. That's good.
And what's funny is I don't think it really even needs to be a mystery. It could simply be the story about a man who, if his wife is mentally ill and pushing him away, about the struggles of that individual, especially someone who does aspire to murder mystery and how that might complicate his response to his wife. Like, there's actually a lot of meat there too without it having to be a complete mystery.
You're right.
But as mysteries go, yeah.
It wanted to be a mystery, but it wasn't mysterious. It wanted to be a thriller, but it wasn't thrilling. It wanted to be film noir, but it fell flat.
Yeah.
You know,
it could have been a character story, but it wasn't.
Yeah. It tried to be a lot of things and didn't succeed at any of them.
Except taking itself too seriously.
Well, we have lots more to talk about, but we're going to do that after this quick break. This is Kimberly.
And I'm Kristen, hosts of the Murder and Myths podcast.
In our podcast, we tackle a common theme and bring you two stories. One of true crime, where I discuss murder and unsolved cases.
And one of mythology, where I delve into the darker side of Norse, Egyptian, and other lesser-known mythos.
You can find us on Twitter at Murder and Myths and our website, murderandmyths.com.
Our new episodes are available on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, and Spotify. So please leave us a review and let us know what you think.
And don't forget, come for the murder
and stay.
So here's how it works. Christy wrecks her search history. Hey, NSA, we promise it's nothing more nefarious than a podcast. To find out what's true, some of the psychological motivations behind the characters' actions, and real-life applications that relate to our topic. I have no idea what Christy decided to look up. Could be the same thing that captured my curiosity or something I never thought of.
Is it true? So at the very beginning of the movie that they're going in to see, that Kimmel introduces himself to Tony and his girlfriend at,
yeah,
is Butterfield 8. It's true that was a real movie. And it was starring Elizabeth Taylor. A tortured adulterous affair is the plot. And I think it was maybe supposed to say something about what was going to come in the movie, but I couldn't make the connection. I couldn't tell if it was something about Walter and Ellie and trying to give you some insight into that, or if it was just a way to date the film to 1960.
Interesting. But
Either-
it was a real movie.
It was a real movie, and Elizabeth Taylor won her first Academy Award, her leading role in that
Interesting.
movie. Yep. So I was like, they played advertisements before the movie? Now we see that, Coke and
Right.
Nike and whatever. You see those before, but I think when I was a kid, all you saw were trailers for other movies.
Except for the concession stand. That was
Yes, you
you
the
had to take your
concession.
little roller coaster.
Yeah. Yes. Did you put your hands together and do the little fly
No,
thing?
we did the hands up thing.
Oh, that's fun.
and we turned.
Oh, you lean. Oh, see,
Right.
we always put ourselves in a cart. Yes. So, but I didn't remember advertisements.
Yeah, that feels like a new thing.
It does, and I think it was a thing that fell out of fashion when we were young.
Okay.
And so it was a thing that they did because pre-show advertising started in the 1930s. We don't have a specific date. Before the 1930s, they were called trailers because they came at the end of the movie.
Oh, that's why it's called a trailer.
Yes, they would tack the film for the advertisement
Right.
to the end of the movie, and they
Yeah.
were the trailers. They came after, but then they realized people got up and left.
So they turned into previews.
So they put them in the beginning. But that was a normal sort of thing.
Oh, interesting.
So the smoking in the movie theater.
Yes.
Everybody, I was like, wow, that seems very, very inadvisable.
Yeah, or in the club, the way that it was all that smoky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the club, I kind of expect it, but in the movie theater where you crowded people and you have to slide past somebody else and it's dark, what if you drop your cigarette? And I mean, you can light the whole place
But it was
on
a
fire.
thing, right? Am I right?
Well, yes.
Okay.
It was a thing, but it depends on where in the United States you lived, how much of a thing that it was. Bruce Watson answered, I think this was on Quora. I don't know. I'll put the link somewhere. He said in the 1960s, he could remember that you were allowed to smoke in 2 theaters in his small southern college town, but that was the exception and not the norm. But there were other people who commented about being a kid in the 90s. Charles Switzer. I was a kid in 90s Alabama, and I can recall smoking section in restaurants and movie theaters and even grocery stores
What?
that had ashtrays on the walls. So yeah, I remember seeing Jurassic Park in the summer of 1993 when I was 11 years old, and there was a thin cloud of smoke around the screen. So depending on where you lived, it may have been phased out, in the 60s and 70s, but it wasn't gone everywhere in the United States, at least, until the mid-90s.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, a movie theater does sound like a bad idea for that. I mean, but I remember being young and my mom could smoke on the airplane.
Yeah. Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I remember that too. My mom was like, well, we paid for the non-smoking section, but I don't know why, because it doesn't really seem to matter.
It doesn't matter, at all. No. It just means you don't sit next to someone with it.
Right.
Right?
Exactly. The person next to you can't light up. So at least
It's like a little distance, but please.
You're in a big tube. You're going to smell it. Ugh. So the Frank Lloyd Wright book,
Yes.
Living in the City, man, that should not have been that difficult to find because it was first published in January of 1958. And this was supposed to be taking place in 1960. And I get that there was turnover of books or whatever, but a huge name even then. I mean, Frank Lloyd Wright was a huge name. And I think there's maybe less turnover. We have a bigger turnover of things, I think, now because we have the internet and you can read about it.
Yeah.
And there's an excitement about things. if it didn't get covered in the newspaper for 6 months, then
Yeah.
and he was a big name. That book would have been in a
It would
bookstore.
have been. It was the third iteration of the book, right? Like a new title, but actually the same.
Yeah.
It was an updated. It should have been a revised, really. I mean, I feel like, but it's like the third iteration of the book. So I don't know. It does feel a little weird that he didn't have it, but his bookstore also looked a little shabby.
Yeah.
And,
well, he was a rare bookstore.
Right. So
maybe it was just he didn't have it because he's specializing in rare books.
Which is why he asked if he had the first one.
Right.
And he was like, yes, I have the first edition.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, that would be the rare one, not the third edition.
Right.
Which has a new name and maybe some new content. But
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. It felt weird. But I did go look it up. It's very expensive on Amazon right now.
Oh, I believe it.
But, you know, actually you can log in through the archive and look at some pieces of it. But I thought this was the rabbit hole I fell down. Is because this book is not just about architecture.
Mm-hmm.
It's about social structure and city planning and socioeconomic status and ideas of suburbs and things of that sort. And so on a totally different level, like he proposes to solve the issue of urban.
Right.
Right? It's a
Like
big
building
deal.
community. He wasn't just about building houses. He was
No.
about building communities.
Right, not suburbs is like what we think of, which is like just a bedroom community or co-op city. We're talking about like planned communities which transport the connection of urban life into a more planned area to relieve stress. And that summary sounds really kind, but there's a lot to discuss there about what he thinks.
Yeah.
And there's so many good sociology papers out there on this subject.
Yeah.
Boy, I could get lost for a week. If you don't hear from me,
That's where Jackie is.
yeah, check my Hollis history. There you go.
Well, that bartender that Walter talked to when he found the article about the Kimmel murder, he was right. You can't look at someone and tell if they're a murderer.
No, you can't.
Eon.co has the theory of mind, which is the idea that you can look at somebody and know what they're thinking. And that's a bunch of baloney. Bull hockey, as people might
You
say.
can't read minds.
No. And
But you
it's
can
just-
read behavior.
You can read behavior, but
A little.
yeah. And we're kind of at our mercy about what we think about other people, too. That there's the idea that we're projecting something of ourselves on them or projecting their past behavior, which is, a fair way to kind of predict what somebody's going to do in the future. But it's not always accurate.
No. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, there are some things like micro expressions, universal facial expressions that
Right.
are kind of identifiable, but all it is another data point.
Right.
Right.
Well, and because you really don't know what's happening in somebody's mind. So this article talks about Alex Honnold, who is a free mountain climber. So like
That's
a
terrifying.
solo mountain climber, like he uses no ropes and pulleys, no safety equipment whatsoever. And he climbs, mountains by himself with nothing. And so they did the Medical University of South Carolina looked at Alex Honnold's brain and compared it to other people's brains. And like literally has a different thought process. See, different parts of his brain are like the fear center activates differently and for different reasons. So he's literally not afraid. So when you think about it like that, you're like, well, I really can't come up with what he's thinking because I would be terrified.
Yeah.
But he's literally not afraid.
Right.
He understands the risks and understands that they should be scary, but it's not scary to him.
Right. It is hard. I mean, the motivation behind a facial expression. I mean, somebody could give you a quick look of disgust and you don't know whether they're really reacting to you or whether they just had like gas from lunch.
Yeah.
You
Or
know,
they
and
had
they're
a thought
disgusted.
about something else.
Yes.
My teenager does this all the time. Just this look comes across their face.
Yep.
My newest teenager, 2 teenagers now.
Yes,
My
you do.
newest teenager will just like give me this dirty look. And I'm like, what is wrong? Did I do something? No, like had no idea.
No,
this
nothing
face
having
was
to do
making
with you.
It had nothing to do with
Which
me.
is why you can't just read a book and think you know what you're doing with that stuff. But there is some training to be done with that. Like,
Yeah.
But you don't take each, datum and then decide that it paints a picture. It's not connect the dots. It's take all of the things, all of the expressions and the context and what you know.
Yeah.
And sort of, you can then maybe get really good at it. But I will tell you that some people have like just an innate feeling. My husband is like this.
Yeah. He's good at it.
You want to know? Talk about theory of mind. He's that guy. And he struggles with it because he's like, I don't want to be cynical, but I can tell when somebody's that person or somebody, and he just has this quickness about him. And then he'll ignore it because he's like, that's so mean. I should not judge. I don't know this person. And then he almost always turns out to be right. Drives me bananas.
Well, it's frustrating, isn't it?
It's frustrating. How does he do that? Why does he do that? But also he feels bad because he's like,
He doesn't want to think the worst of people, but he's usually right.
Yeah, and that's
about
awful.
the people. Well, that just tells me that he had a lot of people when he was young be dishonest or manipulative.
Right, so he recognizes it right
He can
off.
see it really quickly, and he doesn't want to see it in other
Yeah.
people because it's not fun. Realizing that somebody you have to work with or you have a relationship with in some way is not being honest.
Right, or just like not that person you want to hang out with. Or,
Right.
And I don't know. Sometimes I think that's a blessing, right? Because he can set boundaries where boundaries are due.
Right.
But, it is hard because once you have that first impression, though, how hard is it to prove somebody wrong? Because you make one mistake and every mistake you make as an individual kind of confirms the cynicism. So that's what he doesn't want to do.
Right.
He don't want to give people.
But he's usually right. And
But
that's
he's
frustrating.
usually right. So not really theory of mine, but
Yeah. Similar.
kind of adjacent.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
There you go. So there is a bar in New York called Molly's.
Ooh, okay.
But it's not in a basement or converted subway tunnel like the one in the movie.
I kind of love that.
I
That
thought it
so
was really cool.
Locations were amazing on this
Yeah.
film.
Oh, yeah. That was the best part. Mm-hmm. And it's not off McDougal Street, but it does have, it's an Irish pub with food. And
Yum,
I know
yums.
it looked fun. Nice. I would go there.
I'd go there.
I'd go eat there. All of the sources that we use to inform our discussion here on Killer Fun Podcast can be found on our social media. Join us on Facebook at Killer Fun Podcast, exploring the intersection of crime and entertainment. You can find us on Twitter at Killer Fun Pod, or you can send us an email at killerfunpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share a link to whatever information you're looking for. We love to hear from you. You might learn a little something too. All right, psychology break.
Let's do it.
All right, so we're kind of meant to think that Clara's mother's a hypochondriac at the
Right.
beginning of the movie, until both Clara and her mother die on the same night. So Clara might have downplayed her mother's illness out of either ignorance or selfishness, or Clara's mother or Clara might have had fastidious disorder, which is, we used to call it Munchausen's.
Yeah, Munchausen's is more colloquial.
That's what most people would call it. So it's a serious mental disorder.
Yes, it is.
Yes. Where you either appear sick when you're not, or you do things to make yourself sick. So it's possible that Clara's mother was doing things or pretending to be ill when she wasn't to get Clara's attention, which kind of, that was something that I kind of thought maybe was a little bit of a confirmation of her mother's, or of Clara's own illness, is that, hey, this runs in her family.
Yeah.
But it could have also been Clara doing things to her mother to make her ill so that she would have a reason to leave.
Yes, by proxy is a situation. But they would have typically have to live together. It's usually caretaker who's a by proxy.
Okay.
So because they would be on top of it and they would be looking for the same attention, but via the poor me caregiver, look at my daughter or look at my mother. And they would receive that attention because of that. So by proxy is usually by somebody who's kind of closer.
So it would have been closer.
They would have had to live together.
But I mean, But then you learn, really, she wasn't faking it. She actually died.
Which to me kind of confirmed the whole idea she doesn't have a mentalist disorder, because it was like parallel. Her mom wasn't lying and neither was she. So it was interesting but you know what? I don't know how much attention they really paid, but in that day and age, if we trust that they did their homework, a lot of people had cancer in those days without diagnosis. And so they were sick for longer and nobody really understood, why are they always having these bad days? Why are they always so sick? Why are they they're faking it. And then it turns out they had cancer that was causing all kinds of pain or other symptoms. And so it could have been like, well, she didn't die this time. And you kind of get like, I don't think she's really sick. She just never really, so I don't know. But yeah, that is a big, serious disorder.
Right. So in the 1950s and 1960s, depression was considered to be a rare condition.
Yeah, that's true. It was considered to be rare. Oops.
Yes. It was a clinical diagnosis, but it was rarely applied. And so Clara seems to suffer from severe depression, but they'd have probably called it anxiety back then.
Yeah.
That it wasn't until the 1970s and into the 1990s that things that had been seen as anxiety became depression. Like they kind of separated those out so it was a little more clear in between the two, which I thought was interesting.
And that happens a lot with the psychological disorders because there's so many overlapping symptoms. And there's so many people who have both.
Right.
That it's hard to start to parse out what goes where.
Yeah, which one's anxiety and which one's depression?
Well, and the problem is that when you look at mental health the same way you do medical health, you're trying to look for signs and symptoms. And then if you have like this collection of things, it means this. But in mental health, you can have something that is a symptom of one disorder and actually the disorder on another token. Depression is a symptom of X, Y, and Z, like multiple different things.
Right.
It's also its own diagnosis. So the best medical kind of idea is sometimes migraines are a part of a bigger diagnosis, and sometimes you only have migraines.
Okay.
But most medical disorders don't really work that way, which is why in mental disorders, there's a lot of people who look at it as a network situation.
Okay.
Think about like, nodes. Like if this one lights up, then it's going to probably hit these by a matter of percentage. Like if this lights up, you have like an 80% chance that this one's going to light up. And then if that lights up, then you have like a 90% chance this one does. And then it creates like this sort of network, right? Like we can trace the domino effect a little bit, but we can't really, but we can a little, right? But by thinking of it that way, we get a little bit better at parsing out this depression, anxiety thing and being a little more holistic, because we can't just say, oh, you have this disorder, you need to take this medicine. It's not like, oh, you have a bacterial infection, I'm going to give you amoxicillin or penicillin, yada, yada. Like, we kind of have to say, oh, okay, well, there's a whole bunch of inflamed nodes going on, and we're all just going to treat them all.
Right, yeah. Jumping off a bridge isn't a common method of suicide outside of entertainment, at least.
Yeah, entertainment makes it wildly popular.
Yeah. But it tends to be like gunshots in that it's very effective. Harvard had an article about bridges and suicide, and they likened it to jumping from a great height and shooting oneself. They're have similar outcomes because once you start, you can't stop. It's not like taking pills where you can go to the hospital and have your stomach pump, like we saw with Clara.
Right.
But once you pull the trigger or once you jump off the bridge or the building, you may survive, but you may not, and there's going to be some sort of injury.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of things going on. That erecting a barrier can help if there's a spot that's popular, a particular bridge or a building where people like to jump from. You can erect a barrier, and they found that they're unlikely to go to a nearby spot and also jump. But it's difficult to tell if they'll just go to a different place and jump. But if it's a spontaneous sort of decision and they can't jump easily enough, they might not do it. Same reason of removing guns from a home.
That's the thing, is that people don't realize. Kay Jamison does a really good job in her books on suicide about this, that it's far more spontaneous than you might think for a lot of people who attempt. We tend to think about the most severe cases where they have a plan in place and things, and that's true. And there is a lot of that, but it's actually kind of surprising how many are sort of last minute decisions. And that's why it's so hard to stop, because it doesn't necessarily have like a very good predictor. And so, especially for bridges, boy, if one person jumps off a bridge and the news reports it, suicide attempts in that area or suicide completions in that area skyrocket.
Yeah.
Because people are walking along the bridge and they're like, oh, why not me? Me too.
Yeah.
They go.
And off they go.
So there's a couple of really interesting interviews from people who jumped off the Golden Gate and made it.
Ooh.
Only a few. But they were like, we've got to talk to these people, because it was surprising to the family. It was at a time where the Golden Gate was a kind of a romanticized area to do that. And they all said the same thing. I don't know. I mean, it was just a hard day, and was walking along the bridge already. And it was like, I can just do this. I can just jump and be free. And they just did it. They were like, I didn't think about it before. I didn't come to the bridge to do it. Like, and it was very interesting. And that was like a eye opener for the clinicians to go, suicide is not what we think it is.
Right.
Because unfortunately, too many people who complete it, we don't get their stories. And so we don't have enough. And even if they write their stories, it's because that was more pre-planned. So it doesn't talk about anything to do with the people who don't leave notes, which is actually far more common.
Right. Yeah. Hardly anybody leaves a note.
Hardly
really,
anybody.
Right? Despite what you see.
Despite what you see. Most people do not. Yeah.
And even some of those that do, if you believe entertainment, some of those that do didn't really leave it.
That's
because
true.
it was covering up a murder.
Oh, yes. Covering up a murderer.
All right. Real life.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The movie was so boring. I'm stealing myself for real life. Is there any real life?
That beautiful house. It's a real house.
You have,
I know.
I am delighted now.
Yes. It wasn't built until 1968. So it's not exactly period to 1960.
That's fine. I forgive it.
I'll forgive anything. It's 5,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms. Spiral staircase to the basement is just amazing. It's in Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
That they wanted a period building for that house, a home. They found it in Cincinnati. So
the sunken living room, I'm just obsessed. I'm obsessed with it. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yep.
Built-in sofas. Y'all, the built-ins. Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's like beautiful. The real star of the film is a mid-century modern home where Walter and Clara live, according to dirt.com. Yep. The brick and glass pad can actually be found in Amberley, a small village located about 10 miles north of Cincinnati. The architect of it is a little ambiguous.
Okay.
So older listings attribute it to an architect named Neil Hardy.
Okay.
Then later it was websites claimed that it was Hugh Hardy of Hardy Haltzman Pfeiffer who designed it. And then the most recent listing says Benjamin Dombar, who was an apprentice of Frank Lloyd Wright, was behind the design.
Interesting.
So a lot of people want to attribute credit to a lot of different people, depending on your aesthetics. So, but nobody knows for sure. You would think that you'd be able to
I feel like if it was a right home, we would know.
Oh yeah. Well,
but and even if it was an apprentice of a right home,
so?
We would know.
Yeah.
I think so, because there's just too much documentation about Wright and his apprentices, unless it was somebody who was not actually an apprentice, but rather somebody who was a fan.
Okay.
Right.
That's possible.
Which is totally possible. I mean, his influence is, wide.
Yeah.
So
it's been modernized in all the right spots, which I think is probably why you don't see much of kitchens and bathrooms.
Right, because you would see the updated fixtures and things of that sort.
but it sold most recently in April of 2020 for $858,000.
No.
Yep.
That's like within reach. What are you talking about?
I know.
I mean, it's still completely out of my
mean,
budget, but it's within reach.
Well, I mean, thank you, Cincinnati's affordable housing market.
It's not like over $1 million.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 5 bedrooms, 5,000 square feet. That's a pretty big house.
I mean, but even if that style was condensed into 2,000 square feet, I would be like...
It'd be perfect. Oh, yeah. Harry's Rainbow Grill may have been fictional,
Okay.
but the location was actually to the time period.
Okay.
It was a Fritz's, which I guess used to be a chain in the 50s and 60s. And it was also outside of Cincinnati, because it had the right period look.
Yeah.
And they transformed it. And this article from the Claremont Sun, Claremont is near Cincinnati in Ohio. It's from 2014. And they called the film The Blunderer. That's how we know for sure that during filming, they called it The Blunderer.
Yeah.
And only changed the name later.
Interesting.
So they really did pack some hallmarks of a troubled marriage into Walter and Clara's relationship.
Yes, they did.
Very well-mined, has warning signs of a troubled marriage. And they took a bunch of these things off. They're always criticizing one another.
Yes, that's a horseman.
He criticized her, and she criticized him not spending as much time on his real job as his hobby. Don't have sex anymore. He wanted to christen the house, and she was uninterested. They have the same argument over and over and over. Even if she was right, it was still the same one.
That's true.
They kept secrets from one another. He was thinking about having an affair, even if he had not yet started. I mean, a whole bunch of stuff was check.
Yeah. They were not doing well.
They were not doing well, and they weren't very subtle about how poor their relationship was in this movie. Women really are the driving force in real estate and have been for a really long time. So Apartment Therapy had a whole article, The Untold History Behind Why Most Real Estate Agents Are Women.
Interesting.
Yep.
I'm going to guess. Let me guess.
Okay.
A couple of things. All right, let me see.
Okay.
Let me see. I think probably because... it's design. And back in those days, the women were more homemakers. And so if they were going to have a job outside the home, it was a more adjacent to their typical role. And then I think second, it was flexible for kids so that they could be in and out as they needed to be instead of working the 9 to 5 kind of situation.
Ding.
Those are my 2 guesses.
Ding, ding, ding.
Woohoo!
Both of those are right. And basically... That's basically it.
Oh, I nailed it.
You nailed it like perfectly. That they weren't typically brokers, and they're still less often brokers. It's seen as a motherly profession.
Interesting. I can see that.
That if you're familiar with being a homemaker, you know what goes into making a comfortable and livable home, and therefore that makes you an authority
in that subject.
And so that's kind of why it was okay. You could be, a nurse, a teacher, a homemaker, or a real estate agent. Those were the jobs that you had available. Maybe a secretary.
Right.
Yeah,
making everything run, keeping it together.
Yeah.
Doing everything to keep everything alive. Yeah, that sounds right about right.
And it was flexible. So they could, they could schedule their days either when somebody else would be available to watch their kids or when the kids were in school. Mm-hmm. That was it.
That's it.
Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
There we go. So next time, we're going to give old Patricia Highsmith a do-over.
I think we need to.
Because I think this movie was not emblematic of her best work. Or even if The Blunderer was an excellent book, this movie didn't depict it well. So we're going to watch another movie adapted from a novel of hers, The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Yay!
Yes, which I already know is enjoyable.
Yes. It's been a long time since I've seen it.
Yeah, me too.
And it will be fun to watch it again.
It was one of those that I watched a lot at the same time I watched Gattaca.
Okay.
Because we had HBO back then. And this was another one of those movies that they played a lot on HBO.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
It
well,
was-
it'll be fun to revisit that.
Yeah, it will be fun. So until next time, be safe, be kind, and wash your hands.
Bum, bum, bum. Da, 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 da.